Founders at Work. Stories of Startups Early Days. By Jessica Livingston. Saber Bhatia. Co-founder, Hotmail. When co-workers Saber Bhatia and Jack Smith began working on their first startup idea, a web-based personal database they called JavaSoft, they were frustrated because their employer's firewall prevented them from accessing their personal email accounts. To solve their problem, they came up with the idea of email accounts that could be accessed anonymously through a web browser. This idea became the startup. In 1996, the first web-based email was born, offering people free email accounts that could be accessed from any computer with an internet connection. Less than 2 years later, they had grown Hotmail's user base faster than any media company in history. On New Year's Eve, 1997, Microsoft acquired Hotmail for $400 million. Livingston, take me back to how the idea got started and evolved into Hotmail. How did you know Jack? Bhatia, I met Jack Smith when I joined Apple Computer. We were working on the same project building PowerBook portables. Our manager left the company to join a startup in the Valley called Firepower Systems. Jack and I knew Apple would have given us steady, stable employment, but it wasn't with grand stock options. So we decided to leave Apple and join the startup. We worked very hard, cranking out products, chips that were used to design PCs that ran on the PowerPC processor. These would run multiple operating systems, and at that time the idea was that if the insides of the computer were better and faster, then people would switch because it ran multiple operating systems, including either the Unix or Windows architecture. If the processor was better, obviously that would eliminate the need to get Intel-based processors, because the architecture of RISC-based systems was better. But what happened over time is that Intel itself caught up on the price/performance curve. After 2 years the company really wasn't doing very much. Our manager who hired the two of us left and went on his own. So I was kind of looking around to see what I should do with my life, whether I should go to business school or look at other things. The internet was just unfolding, so I started spending more and more time on it, and it was interesting. It was exciting to see these lit_til companies get started. 2 of my colleagues from Stanford had gone on to start Yahoo, and I thought, wow. This is just a list, a directory which tells you what is where. And somebody put $1 million in them. I mean, that was huge. So I thought, this internet thing is here to stay, and I started playing around with it and came up with the idea to do a simple to install database at the back end. Then you'd use the browser as the front end. It could store any piece of information at the back, but the browser would be used to display it. So people could just look for it and be able to create a personal database of anything, con_tact information, phone numbers, special files, or whatever it is that you would do on a local PC. So I wrote a business plan and didn't know what to do with it. I was the only guy, so how do you build a company? I knew Jack and knew that he was a great software and hardware engineer. So I shared this idea with him. He read the business plan and said the next day, "This is great, where do I sign?" So we started and I said, the next thing we need to do is go raise some money and try to figure out how to hire more people and take this to the next level. Livingston, had you quit your jobs? Bhatia, no, we were actually both working, so we decided to spend all of the time on the weekends and evenings building this product. Then it came to a point that one of us had to quit our job to focus full-time on it, so I told Jack, I'm single and don't have a family. Why don't you quit and start working on this and I'll give you half of my salary. So at least he could support his family. I didn't need that much money. We started building the product and then started looking around for funding. We went to a number of VCs and many of them turned us down because they were like, how are you going to make money if you are going to give it away for free? What's the revenue mechanism? We said we would capture detailed demographic information about people and that detailed quality of information on individuals would help us advertise to them. But of course advertising was not a proven revenue model at that time. Livingston, how did the JavaSoft idea morph into Hotmail? Badia, while we were putting the business plan for JavaSoft together and were working at Firepower Systems, they installed a firewall around our corporate intranet that prevented us from dialing out to our personal email accounts. I had an account at Stanford and Jack had one at AOL, so we would dial out and email each other. But we couldn't do that anymore because the firewall prevented us from accessing our personal accounts. So we ended up exchanging information on floppy disks and on physical pieces of paper. That's when it occurred to us, wait a minute, we can access any website in the world through a web browser. If we made email available through the web browser, that would solve our problem. And then it occurred to us, if that would solve our problem, it would solve the problems of many others. We didn't know how many others, but email was something that everyone used. To provide ubiquitous access to that email from any web browser from anywhere in the world was the killer idea. Livingston, this killer idea emerged because you guys were trying to solve the personal email exchange problem for yourselves. Badia, absolutely. That we could access our email from only two places, our homes and our work. And while we were at work, we could not access our personal email accounts. Livingston, once you were onto the concept of web-based email, did you immediately discard the JavaSoft database idea and go full throttle with Hotmail? Badia, we were kind of torn. Our plan was to use the JavaSoft idea to get money from venture capitalists. But actually the killer arrow in our quiver was always email because we thought that it was even bigger than the original idea. Livingston, but you didn't want to tell people about the killer idea because you were afraid they'd copy you? Badia, that they would copy us, or what if they just shared this idea with Netscape? Or shared it with anyone else? You have to realize that in those days we had nothing, just the idea. When we were approaching venture capitalists, they would shoot us down for one reason or another, for reasons we thought were frivolous, like, you guys, what is your background? So we would tell them that our background was in hardware engineering. Why are you building software? Many of them also said, but you're too young. Do you have any management experience? No, we said, we're two young kids, we have a great idea. The whole VC community has so many links with each other you never know. Netscape was building email servers. What if the VCS were just to say to them, hey, why don't you do web-based email? And that's it, that's the idea, right? There was not that much to protect in terms of IP. Whoever built it first would win the market. So we were afraid, and that's why we kept that as the secret. But we were going to do web-based email no matter what, even if we got funding for the other idea. Livingston, I read that you judged the VCS by their reaction to the JavaSoft idea. Did you plan this clever approach? Badia, we actually planned to do this. You can't get an audience with any venture capitalist without sharing a business plan, but we didn't want our business plan floating around somewhere with the email idea. So we would go in with the JavaSoft business plan. If they passed the litmus test of not rejecting us for the wrong reasons and said, okay, we don't mind that you're young, we don't mind that you don't have management experience, only when they would start poking holes in the actual idea would we share the Hotmail idea with them. That was actually just because we didn't trust them. Livingston, you finally pitched Draper Fisher Jurvetson, DFJ, and they passed the test. Tell me about getting funding. Badia, they liked the idea right off the bat. They said, we're going to get one of our partners to come in and take a look at this because it could be big. So Tim Draper came in the following week and he liked the idea. After another meeting he said, okay, we're ready to fund you. We like this very much. How much do you want? I did some calculations on the back of an envelope and asked for $3 million, which was our plan based on hiring a few engineers. They said, no, that's too much. How much money do you need just to prove to us that you can do this, that it's even possible to make email available on the web? So I asked for $500,000 and he said, I'll give you $300,000. I said, all right, I'll take it. They wanted 30% of the company, which would value us at $1 million. It was an intense negotiation. I threatened to go to the other VCs if they didn't pony up the money. We finally settled on a 15% split with them and they valued the company at $2 million post money. But they'd put in a right of first refusal. Since I was a young entrepreneur at the time, I didn't understand that this basically meant that you couldn't go to any other VC. So even though they didn't get their chunk in the first piece, in any subsequent round they would have the ability to take up the entire round. Livingston, your lawyer didn't point out that clause. Badia, we didn't have a very good lawyer back then. Of course it was touted to us as we love you so much that we want to have the right to buy the next round. You can go to other people too. But that's the one that got us. It impeded our ability to go to another VC. What ended up happening was that we could not get a higher valuation because DFJ wanted to put more money in the company themselves. So anytime we would talk to another VC, they would talk him out of it. This is not a good company, don't worry about it. So we were really stuck with DFJ for the next round. Livingston, they put you down to other VCs? Badia, they did. Of course, that was very early on and now everything is all fine and dandy, but at that point in time we had a term sheet for a much higher valuation. But when we would talk to any other VC, the other VC would call the guys at DFJ and they'd say, no, don't invest in them. Livingston, were they helpful at all? Badia, yes. Steve Jurvetson was very helpful. He introduced us to a lot of people and, on the whole, they're a good VC firm in the sense that they try to put deals together. But sometimes they don't play by the rules. Nobody knows this, but the round before the deal with Microsoft, they literally put $5 million in the company just because they knew it was going to get sold and that we needed some bridge money. This came at a very expensive valuation with certain rights that should not have come with it, like participating preferred, which is they first get their money out and then they participate in the rest, which was okay for the earlier rounds, but not for the later ones. That was just bridge money that we needed while we were negotiating with Microsoft. They knew full well that we were going to get acquired. We were negotiating about the final price. Livingston, I'll come back to the Microsoft negotiation in a moment. Did your background in hardware help you in terms of building servers that could handle massive loads? Badia, it helped us because we knew what kind of hardware we would need to be able to handle the kind of traffic to our site. Also, when you are hardware designers, you have tremendously more discipline in writing and describing software because in hardware you cannot get it wrong. Every turn of every chip costs you millions of dollars, so when hardware designers design any piece of software, they normally get it right. They use something called state machines to describe the functioning of the software. When you do that, you are very deterministic. If this is the input, then this will be the output. So you write it in a very deterministic fashion and therefore you tend not to make too many mistakes. Whereas the pure software writers, the way they think and architect software is very creative. They put in lots of bells and whistles, but they think, no big deal. If there is a bug, we'll fix it. Put in a patch. You can't do that in hardware. There's no patch. Once you ship a chip, it has to work all the time. So in terms of being able to test it out, there is somewhat of a difference, but I just think that hardware designers would be pretty good software designers as well. Livingston, were you at all worried about intellectual property issues when you left the company to start Hotmail? Badia, no, they were totally different. We were designing chips, which had nothing to do with the internet. Livingston, so you now have $300,000 and you're working full-time on Hotmail. What happened in the 6 months before you launched? Badia, We got funded on February 14, 1996, and the site launched on the 4th of July. We had 100,000 subscribers in the first 3 months and we were growing very rapidly from then on. We were literally getting 1,000, 2,000, 5,000 sign UPS every day. Livingston, how? Badia, it all spread by word of mouth. We launched a massive PR campaign with a PR firm and started talking to different journalists. We did a West Coast and East Coast press tour, and it just took off from there. Livingston, you had a tagline in the body of the email encouraging email recipients to set up their own free Hotmail accounts. How did you come up with this? Badia, it was actually Jack's idea to do that. We ran it by our VCS just to make sure it was okay. When you alter somebody's email, you've got to be very careful. You're sending an email to a friend of yours, and we are kind of violating the sanctity of that email by putting in a tagline at the end of it that says this message has been sent from Hotmail. Get your free email at hotmail.com. So we asked Tim if it was okay that we did this. We said, we don't want to be perceived as the evil company by altering their email. And he said, absolutely, you should do it. And the next thing we know, he claims that this idea was his. He's given a number of interviews literally claiming that he was the father of web-based email. Without him it would not have happened. I can't believe he's just taken credit for everything, including the tagline, which later became known as the classic example of viral marketing. He blatantly claims this at conferences, which I don't think is right. Livingston, he claimed that web-based email was his idea. Badia, that it was our idea, but without them, it would not have happened and that we would have done JavaSoft. Their version is that we told them to do web-based email at that first meeting. Why would they tell us to do web-based email? Livingston, you grew Hotmail's user base faster than any other company in history at that time. Do you believe it was more because you had a great product or you had a good PR campaign? Badia, that's one thing about the internet, if you have something that's good, it spreads by word of mouth and like wildfire. You just have to hire a small PR firm and do it. Livingston, had you always planned for Hotmail to be free for users? Badia, yes. Livingston, how did you convince people you could make money from targeted advertising? That was so novel at the time. Badia, it was novel, but at the same time it wasn't novel, because Yahoo had gotten funding, and later went public, on that basis. Their whole concept was to grow by advertising, even though it was a directory because people would pay for advertising. Our whole idea was that, if page impressions are a commodity that can be sold, can be monetized, then we would generate far greater page impression than they were able to because you interact a lot more when you do email. You click on something and a page comes up and you click on something and another page comes up. So we were thinking of the number of pages and the number of page impressions as the monetizable quantity. In our estimate, we believed we would overtake Yahoo in the number of page impressions that we would deliver, which was what Yahoo was touting. What has happened in the last 10 years is that advertising has grown even more. It's not just page impressions, but the number of click-throughs. The most monetizable part of advertising, at least online advertising today, is the click-through to another advertiser, which is search. When people search, they're most likely to click through because that's when they're looking for something. Google has proven remarkably well that click-through is a monetizable quantity more than page impressions. You can have 100 page impressions and that has some value, but the click-through has far greater value because that's how advertisers measure, is this advertising working for us or not? Livingston, did you have a hard time signing up advertisers at first? Badia, it takes a long time before you can break through to an advertiser and get them to start paying you. In fact, the first 3 or 4 months we were doing advertising for our advertisers for free. We had them give us their banners, just to show that this was a mechanism for people to get their product in front of millions and millions of consumers. People would ask, so, How are you going to make money? And the whole thing about making money was all those pesky ads. Ads were perceived to be kind of a negative. And that's the reason why, when there used to be 25 search engines, only 2 or 3 have survived. The others have died because they made their front pages look like Las Vegas casinos as opposed to preserving that simple, clean interface that Google has. I think the strategy that Google took was far better. They earned the trust of the end consumer. Livingston, did Hotmail ever become profitable from advertising? Badia, no, we didn't become profitable. But we weren't losing that much money. We found that we were not the best at selling ads, so we outsourced the whole thing to another company and said, you guys go sell the ads for us. We'll just focus on delivering these ads to you no matter how much you sell them for. Just give us a percentage of revenue with a minimum commitment and we won't go to anybody else. That minimum commitment they gave us, which was about $1 million per month, was alone sufficient for us to break even. Our costs were so low, we were spending about $1 million a month. So though we were not wildly profitable, we were not losing that much money. Livingston, getting back to the first 6 months before you launched, tell me about the major turning points. Badia, before we launched, I think the first major turning point was getting the $300,000 in funding. That was huge for us 2 young kids to get that much money. The second turning point really was when I started using it and I told my friends and family about it, and everybody who used the product, 50 or 100 or so people, loved it. And then of course, the interesting thing was that when we finally did launch, each of us had pagers that would send us a page every hour, so we would know how quickly our user base was growing. It was just phenomenal. 100 people signed up last hour, 200 people this hour. Everyone knew how many users were signing on, and that was very motivating to the whole company. Livingston, was there ever a time when you thought you were in trouble? Badia, the only time was when we had to go in for the second round of financing. We didn't have any money and Tim was at the Olympics in Atlanta and he refused to fund us because we wanted a slightly higher valuation. This was what all the other VCs were telling us, but he wanted to invest at a lower valuation. We had only a couple of weeks worth of money left and I would not have been able to meet the next payroll. So as soon as he came back, we literally had to accept his terms and move on. Livingston, couldn't you have argued legally that by not agreeing to a higher valuation that they had refused you? Badia, at that point you are stuck, you've got to make a decision one way or the other and move on. Livingston, so really the biggest challenge in the early years of Hotmail was the funding? Badia, yeah, it was the funding. And of course then the tough part was in scaling up to that growth. Our servers would break down and we had to worry about scalability problems and how to add servers and make it more reliable. It was not all smooth sailing. Livingston, did you ever go out of service? Badia, we went out of service for a few hours sometimes and we didn't have proper backups, or the ability to restore things. Reliability was an issue and it took us some time to cross the reliability curve. Livingston, was there ever a time when you felt you couldn't keep up? Badia, we just handled the problems as they came around, we put in a new system, re-architected some of the things. The engineers worked really hard, and we kind of made it work. But even now there are times when you log into Hotmail and it says, sorry, the server is down. These are just issues when you have a very large user base. Livingston, web-based email was so new to the world. What did consumers misunderstand? Badia, we had a sales guy who signed up his mom, and his mom said, yes, I can see that there's an email from you, but how do I read it? And he said, Mom, go and click on it. She didn't know you had to click on it. I heard another story from a man who said his sister would get into the Hotmail account not directly by going to http://hotmail.com, but by going to Yahoo, typing in the word Hotmail, and then it would bring up the Hotmail page and then she'd log in. And he'd say, "Why do you do it that way?" And the sister would say, "My friend taught me this is how you get to Hotmail, so that's what I've been doing." The usage patterns of how people used the internet were baffling to us. Livingston, who were you most nervous about from a competitive standpoint? Badia, anybody in the internet space. We were most nervous about companies like Netscape because Netscape was building email servers and they would provide web-based access to the servers. Their whole point was that they provided web-based management to servers that you could set up. So, as system administrators, you could check to see how many had people signed up or whatever, but they were not offering web-based mail to people. The good news was that a lot of people said, "I'm not sure email is a browser-based product. Email is best done on an email client like Outlook Express. It doesn't belong in the browser." That's what Jerry Yang said at Yahoo. We were like, great. So we had no competition from them for the first 8 months or so, till we reached a certain point and then they had no choice but to buy a company. I heard that Yahoo gave up the opportunity to buy Google for $1,000,000, that at one point, Google would have been happy to be sold to them for $1 million. Livingston, Yahoo ultimately wound up buying Rocket Mail. They were your first real competitor, right? Tell me about them. Badia, they were our partners. We needed to have a directory of users that people could search and send email to. Instead of building our own directory, we partnered with Rocket Mail. We said, "Okay, we'll use your directory on our website and we'll send you our registration data so you could register these people's email accounts." We didn't want to build a directory just for people to search for email. All they had was a directory, that's what they specialized in, that was their business. They found out how many registrations we were sending them daily. They saw our growth from hundreds to thousands to tens of thousands, and that's when they said, "Even we ourselves cannot get these kinds of registrations on our website. We should do email." So they decided to do email, and that's how they came up with Rocket Mail. Livingston, were you pissed? Badia, they are also funded by Draper Fisher Jurvetson. So Draper was seeing two of its own companies create two different email systems. We felt bad that they had done it, but we couldn't go to Draper and say anything. It was a decision that the company took, that's what DFJ told us, and we were pissed at them, but at that time we knew we had to not share too much information with DFJ as well. Livingston, so you didn't have a showdown with Rocket Mail? Badia, we just scrapped our partnership and decided, okay, competition is competition. Livingston, then you started to get into talks with Microsoft? Badia, talks with Microsoft started after our first anniversary, which was July 1997. In August or so, Microsoft contacted us and said, "Wow, this is really big. Do you really have 7 million subscribers?" They knew that we were growing and they wanted to find out how we provided email to 7 million subscribers because they were having a hard time providing email to just 2.5 million MSN customers. So we began talking of a partnership deal, and that's how we started talking to each other. We worked out a detailed business plan about how we would provide email to their subscribers, and then they said they wanted a tighter relationship between us and their company, that they wanted to invest in our company. So they looked at our business plan and saw very quickly that we wanted to be more than just an email company. We wanted to incorporate all of the other functions as well, such as personalized news and those kinds of things. We wanted to be a portal at that point in time. So that's when they came to us. They wanted to be a portal as well, and they said, "We cannot have one of our providers of email be a competitor of ours, so have you thought of an acquisition?" And I said, "I really haven't thought of an acquisition, but at the right price I can think of anything." Livingston, tell me about the negotiation process. Badia, they called us to meet with Bill on October 13, 1997, and we were shown the Microsoft campus, headquarters, the whole works. We were taken to Bill's office, met with him, and then we were taken to a room with a gigantic table, and there were about 15 Microsoft negotiators sitting on the other side, business development people, lawyers, accountants, all of them. They gave a presentation about how much they liked the company and this and that, and they said they wanted to buy us and placed an offer of $160 million. I knew that that was the opening shot and I said, "Thank you very much for making an offer. We really like your company and like the fact that you like us so much. We'll go back to our board and discuss this and get back to you." And the CFO said, "Man, is that in the right ballpark?" He wanted me to open my mouth, but I was told beforehand that if I opened my mouth, there was no way I could negotiate with so many people. It was just the three of us, Jack Smith, myself, and our VP of Marketing. "Livingston, the VCS gave you the liberty to negotiate, right? That surprises me." "Yeah, luckily it was very early on. Had we been burning through a lot of cash, had we been around for a while, they probably would have put pressure on us. But we were under no pressure at that point in time." "Livingston, what drove you to keep on negotiating until you got the $400 million? Yeah, once you've got a lead in terms of a subscriber base, that is unassailable. It can't be replicated easily. So I knew even if they started developing the product, I have no doubt in my mind that they could have developed it. So many engineers and smart people in Microsoft. At that time they had something like 16,000 engineers, and I had a total of 60 people in the company, only 14 engineers, so it would have been easy to pick 15 guys from 16,000 and build this product. But I knew we had that momentum behind us, and that is very hard to replicate. Livingston, you arrived in this country with only $250 in your pocket. Wasn't it tempting for you to agree to sell for, say, $300 million? Yeah, once you have tasted this kind of success, once you've tasted that it works, that you've got subscribers who are telling you it's good, you know you are going to get there. In fact, that's exactly what's happened. That 6-month lead that we had already over any of our competitors today has translated into about a 50 to 100 million user lead. Seeing how they did a lousy job of providing email to their 2.5 million subscribers, I also knew that they didn't have the technology in-house. Because if they did, they wouldn't have been asking to license this from us. If we had gone the licensing route, I think we would have been as big as Google. Because that's what Google did, right? Initially, they said, "We've got search. Why don't we license search to everyone else?" That was their original business model. They licensed it to Yahoo, Microsoft, and AOL and grew big based on their subscribers. Livingston, do you wish you had gone the licensing route? Yeah, no, it would have been a lot more difficult, because the cost of providing email was much higher than the cost of providing search, even though search is far more profitable than email in terms of the advertising monetizability of search. Because when somebody searches, they are looking to find something, they are in the mood to click. Email is more of a destination. When you are doing email, you don't want to be disturbed by what's on the right, you want to read whatever your friend has written to you. So it's the end product. It's not a click-through kind of a product. So I don't know where we would have ended up had we done that. Livingston, looking back on your experience with Hotmail, what surprised you most? Yeah, I think I knew that Hotmail was going to become successful one day. I was just shocked that all of that happened in a span of 20 months from start to finish. Those kinds of things don't happen very often, from the time you start to the time you see an exit in less than 2 years. That's what shocked me. And I have not been able to replicate that kind of meteoric growth and success yet. I was lucky also, I was at the right place at the right time. I have been thinking about new ideas and new companies in the last 5 years and have been working on some really exciting things. But I don't think that any one of these will become successful in that short a period of time. Livingston, web-based email was one of those big ideas that was waiting right under people's noses. Why did you and Jack come up with the idea first? Badia, I don't know why. Let me tell you one other thing about the internet, there are thousands of such ideas under our noses even as we speak. Why things happen, I just don't know. Maybe somebody has a need and, in our case, we had a need. That's what triggered the idea. Sometimes ideas are born out of necessity, you solve a problem for yourself, and you hopefully solve it for a number of other people too. The one lesson that I've learned in my experience while I did Hotmail and since I've done Hotmail is you have got to own the customer. The customers came to us for free at Hotmail. Even though they were free customers, what the last 10 to 15 years of my experience of the internet has taught me is that it's okay if you don't monetize them right up front. Eventually, you will be able to. But having that customer base and being able to tap into that customer base and upsell them on services, or advertise, you can always make money off them. Livingston, is there any advice you would give to someone thinking of starting a startup? Badia, the general piece of advice, which is fairly mundane and oft repeated, is, make sure you write a business plan because it will crystallize your thoughts to communicate your ideas with somebody else. Make sure that once you have written your business plan, you have somebody read and critique it and ask you questions. It doesn't have to be a cookie-cutter business plan with glossy pages and lots of information. Essentially, it's a plan that says what the company is going to do, what problem it is going to solve, how big the market is, what the sources of revenue for the company are, what your exit strategy is for your investors, what amount of money is required, how you are going to market it, what kind of people you need, what the technology risks are, marketing risks, execution risks. Those are the fundamentals of what goes into a business plan, and many people have it in their heads but don't write it down. Second is, don't try to change user behavior dramatically. If you are expecting people to dramatically change the way they do things, it's not going to happen. Try to make it such that it's a small change, yet an important one. For example, the reason that Hotmail succeeded was because people were accustomed to going to different websites. All they had to do was put in their name and password and a little bit of information and they got an email account. So in that regard, it was the ease of use of getting online and having an identity. The other reason why Hotmail became kind of like its own phenomenal PR was every time somebody sent an email out, it was sent from @hotmail.com. That's of huge branding value, to have that moniker in people's email IDs. So when people would give a business card to somebody that said @hotmail.com, it perpetuated the brand. And the other lessons are you've got to own the customer and make sure there is a full loop between your product and that it has the least amount of resistance before you get to your end customer. Do partnerships. What Google did with partnerships was phenomenal, giving the search away to other companies to help them make their so-called portals. But in the end, Google got the customer because they got the branding. Livingston, you were a programmer. How did you learn how to write a business plan? Tell me about the one you wrote for Hotmail. Badia, there are some things that, even though you go to school for a certain reason and you gain skills, are just natural talents that people have. One of the natural talents that I believe I have is the ability to communicate. A business plan is nothing more than your own communication to a person not sitting in front of you, an imaginary person who will read it. Try to answer every possible question that that person could raise. That's the description of a business plan, really. I didn't take any formal lessons. I just sat down and I wrote about the problem we were trying to solve, and in 2 paragraphs I described the World Wide Web and how it had grown, and what its future potential could be. I said, this is the problem today that we are trying to address, this is how we hope to address it, with this idea. This is how we hope to monetize it, and this is what page impressions are able to fetch you in the print world. If you translate it into the online world, this is how it will happen. And that's it, that was the core of our business plan. I wrote it in one night, and the next day I went to work looking really sleepy and tired. My boss said, another one of those days of late night partying. I'm like, yeah, something like that. He said, Alright, you'll be productive only in the afternoon. Take the morning off. Little did he know that I was actual up all night writing a business plan, not partying.